algorithm number 2. Anytime anyone is not on the ship that should be, send Worf an email. Watching Star Trek is something we did. Like, we found it on Netflix, and we would randomly, while we were eating, put on an episode of usually TNG. And we would joke and laugh and make fun of stuff. And then I was randomly asked to be on a podcast called Clash of the Titans about interactive fiction. And at one point, Star Trek came up, and I made some joke. It was actually about the pads. So on Next Generation, they have these iPads. And the joke was that, like, whenever you have tons of information, they would have piles of these things. Like, the Wi-Fi is down on the Enterprise, and some poor ensign has to reset these, like, every night. Like, there's a pile of these under Picard's desk or something. And, like, as we were making that joke, I'm like, oh, my husband and I, we joke about this all the time. This is the kinds of things we notice. And the hosts were like, oh, you totally have to, like, do this. And it was a joke. But I brought it up with Neil, and I'm like, yeah, you know, it would just be basically turning on a recorder while we do all the stuff we do.
Dan and I started rewatching TNG episodes just to laugh at them and rip them apart. And after a while, we were both like, hey, we could do this on a recording. That's what a podcast is. So we just went from there. We just decided, all right, let's do it, because no one told us we couldn't.
I totally want to be invited to Kaylar's ice cream social.
We have a
gagh flavor.
Oh! There's a gagh fountain. Great. Brilliant.
Oh, man.
Oh, that's just, like, I can just see it, like, do you know that Play-Doh, like, worm thing you can make?
Yeah,
where
the pasta factory.
The pasta factory, right, but it's vertical, like, it's extruding worms.
And the ice cream in your bowl is still moving.
Right. I think I'm the nitpicker.
Dan, when he takes notes, he takes copious notes. I mean, he just about transcribes the episode. I would never have the patience for that, but I'm so glad that he does, because there are things I'll forget in the initial watch that he brings up, and so that's one of the things he does that's really important. The other thing is that Dan knows technology. I don't. I think I may be a little more genre savvy in terms of television, because I watched a lot of that junk. But Dan knows technology. When they talk about using a Borg algorithm to figure something out, Dan's the one to be like, what the hell does that mean?
Most of what I do on the show is I rant. It's what I do when I watch this stuff. I'm a ranter. I will admit it. I will take apart parts of the story that make no sense. I will take parts of the technology that make no sense. Parts of the character. Like, why would someone act like that given this situation? Like, that's totally illogical. So I think Neil's very much the funnier one. And I mean, Neil has a background in comedy. He used to do stand-up. Neil will notice stuff that is crazy. One of the jokes he made that killed me was, like, there's an episode where they find Lore, Data's double. And, like, the first thing Neil noticed was there was a disembodied butt in the background. But he's like, go back, there's Lore's butt in the lower quadrant.
I feel as though I'm the person who sees details that might be funny. They're not relevant to the episode, but I noticed, like, how somebody's dressed, or this guy was in an episode of LA Law where he played someone who killed a judge and all that.
Also, like, presumably this is a digital signal, which means they had to send a signal that was just this weird, like, pew-pew noise. Like, why? They speak English!
Right.
Like, send a literal text message that says, like, we are experiencing solar flares.
Right. Well, because
Send ship.
Like, it's way more bytes to send pew than, like, solar flares happening at this location. I was literally talking about Star Trek with my hairdresser earlier this week. I think if I don't have a healthy outlet for it, it just comes out at random people.
A while back, Dan and Neil told me that they were thinking of starting a podcast about Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I was super excited about it. And then they asked me if I would be willing to come on for an episode or two. And I believe my words at the time were, yeah.
You know, where I thought about it was in the episode Code of Honor, Season 1. It's the planet of black people. I cringe to say that. And at the time, I remember thinking, I wish we knew somebody, a Trekkie who is a person of color, who could be here and to talk about how it impacts them. Because, you know, I can say it's racist and Dan can say it's racist, but we're a couple of white guys and we only have a certain perspective. So we missed that opportunity. But then when Season 2 came up, there are a lot of episodes that are, well, they're misogynist. I mean, let's just say it. And I wanted to have a woman on to talk about that. You know, that's being an ally. And that's part of what this is. It's pointing out where Trek fails, and a lot of where it fails is diversity. There's something else this show does, and this is one of the first examples of it, but unfortunately not the last. Everything that happens to women on this show is sexualized. You know, we've said that in every franchise, there is the character that gets mumped. In this, it's Geordi. Whenever someone has to be abducted, brainwashed, tortured, it's Geordi. In Voyager, it was Harry Kim. But in Star Trek, it's Geordi unless the violence or the misfortune is sexual, in which case it's Troy.
Yep.
I think criticism of media is vital. If you're going to be a fan of anything, you have to criticize it. Because, you know, some people will say things like, oh, when I see a movie, I just want to turn my brain off. I enjoy things more when my brain is on. I want to think about how it works, why it works. Why is this character doing this? Why did the filmmaker choose to have this character be played by this actor? Or have these sorts of things happen to them? I think it's vital.
My brain is on all the freaking time. I cannot shut it off. It's how I'm wired. And so I never understand brainless entertainment. Because even if you're watching something just for the fun of it, I never understand shutting off your brain entirely. Criticizing media for me is about being an active consumer of it.
I don't see why we can't love something and also see its shortcomings. In fact, that's loving something like an adult, because you want to see it get better instead of loving something like a child where it's just perfect as it is. Well, nothing is perfect as it is.
Anything that was that complicated and had so many people writing for it is going to be inconsistent, and it's going to have parts you love and parts that are deeply problematic.
I always thought that art was supposed to speak about life and sort of be bigger than just mindless entertainment. Even if it's written that way, it still says something about the people who made it and the people who watch it.
I think that one thing that people make a big mistake on is they think, well, you know, such and such is just a book or it's just a TV show. But I think that that's a very small-minded idea because really the media that we consume is reflective of our culture, and our culture similarly reflects our media. They work together, they affect each other. So if we just sit back and are passive consumers when problematic things happen and we don't stop and think and talk about them, then I think that it has really, really bad ramifications on our society as a whole.
As we as a culture grow and have different standards, the stuff that we liked or said in the past becomes more and more problematic. And I think you can definitely critique things that you love and still love them. And I think in some ways, when so much of our culture has this kind of problematic aspect, it's almost our duty and our job to critique the things we love and to say, I can love Cranky Picard, but I can really dislike the way the show deals with Troy a lot of the times. Or I can think that some episodes are just making up the tech stuff.
Dan and I were very into looking at diversity and what it means and what it does for a work of art. And that means a lack of diversity is something we can't help but see now.
To pretend the thing I love is perfect is to not see it. is to purposefully not see it, to be willfully blind to its faults. And for me, that's not a real relationship. Can you imagine being in a relationship with a person where you have to willfully ignore the things you don't like about them necessarily, or not, or the quirks, or... I just remember having a conversation with a friend of mine. Do we love people despite their faults or because of them? And when I was younger, I thought it was despite. And now I think it's because. Our faults are what make us us. And to not see the flaws in something or someone is to not see them.
And Troy very sort of clumsily goes, "Hi, we are local people selling local cloth." By the way, I think that's a dumb idea. Like, it's so, like...
It is pure coincidence that we have arrived at the same time as this amazing tale.
Right.
Be at ease, Mintalkins. I mean, friends.
Yeah, I already put my requests in for what I want to do next season.
First and foremost, if we made you laugh, we succeeded. Because we make ourselves laugh all the time. The other element of it is, I hope we've made you think. We hope we've shown something from an angle you might not have thought of.
I would like people to think about the way that Star Trek is not as inclusive as it could be and how it could be more inclusive. The first episode, the original series, aired in 1966. It's 2017. So 51 years later, we do not have a gay character on a Trek series. Now, maybe there's one coming up in Star Trek Discovery. I've heard that there will be. But the fact that it took us 51 years to get here, that's just wrong. There are no trans people. And the people of color are still, relegated to the sidelines. I remember there's an episode, it's a first season episode where the main cast goes onto this planet to deal with some problem, leaving, Geordi in charge of the bridge with Worf, who is a black guy. I mean, he's Klingon, but Michael Dorn is a black man. So it's like there are these two black men and an Asian woman and a Hispanic guy, and I'm like, why does it take a disaster to put people of color in charge of the Enterprise when they make up like 2/3 of the planet? So I would really like people to think about those things and not to hate TNG. I love TNG. I want them to think about it and be hopeful about where the series could go.